According to a U.S. study commissioned by Work Health Life, 67% of millennials say that they're under increased pressure to succeed. From a personal and professional standpoint, this is compared to 40% of Gen-Xers and 23% of boomers. This is all tied to a new phenomenon known as the quarter-life crisis. Jordan Willshear is a high-performance coach who works with millennials who are feeling stressed and overwhelmed to get promotions and a pay raise at work. He helps millennials create a peak performance blueprint which helps them to maximize their career potential, prosperity, and production. He joined me this week to have a conversation about career diversification, succeeding at work, and landing your ideal promotion. As a millennial, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how you help millennials overcome their overwhelm. Buddy, great to be with you today, and thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited to get started. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Jordan, tell me that you help millennials sort of overcome their overwhelm and stress when it comes to getting promotions and asking for pay raises. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about all the great work that you do.
Yeah, it's kind of got to the stage where I'm at in the development of my own career, where I got to the point where I can confidently share what I've learned through my coaching. I was born in 94, so have the experience of what millennials have gone through in terms of being stressed in their career and gone through overwhelming times, and got to the point really where I'm able to coach people through that process because I've lived it and experienced it myself and come out the other side. So that's where it was born from, really.
Yeah, fabulous. So let's dive into some of those personal experiences and how they influence the work that you do today.
Yeah, in terms of, I guess, where it all started, it came from a desire to be able to help other people first and foremost, but to also develop my own kind of skill set. And the best way you can do that is through communicating with people and coaching ideas. And essentially what drove me to this is having the ability to really connect with people has helped me with my natural skill set, and that's helped in regards to dealing with any career challenges I've had.
Yeah, and Jordan, to that point, I'm curious to ask you, how do you define personally when it comes to personal freedom, independence, and ownership of your own decisions?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Ultimately, I think that ownership really comes down to having ownership of your own decisions is what I define as personal freedom. So, for example, the freedom to decide where I work, how I work, when I exercise, when I see friends and family, is being able to have control of these metaphorical dials in my mind which are, I guess, like dials of energy. Like, where do I want to spend it? And having the independence that comes from shaping your own vision of your future, which can be included in conversation with other people. However, that kind of personal freedom that I'm able to have control of my own life is how I define my personal freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And before you dive into the work that you're doing now, I know you spent some time in the world of sports coaching, teaching, and personal training, Molly. So tell me about that portion of your life and how it impacts the person you are today.
Of course, the early formation of my career was involved in various sporting projects. Um, saying really, it would be kind of the soccer coaching has been the place where I started to make the name for myself. The environment I grew up in was a very soccer centric city in the city of Bristol, UK. So it was only kind of natural that my career path develops that way, where I started getting opportunities, first of all, to coach at my local club at 15. And I found at that point I really enjoyed the process of working with people. So that ability to coach and that ability to play a little bit and the academic success that came that way, it got me into university, which was the first gate key, right? That university then got you my first break of going abroad, which got me my teaching placement in Adelaide. It got me coaching in Zambia, which was a really formative sport coaching volunteer experience. Would you like me to go into that a bit more? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
yeah, like for that projects that we did, it was using soccer as a means to teach HIV awareness. And that was really my first exposure to using sport as like a vehicle for positive change. And I've always kept that kind of experience with me, how I can use my coaching to improve the lives of people around me, essentially. And I've always kept that kind of motivation no matter where I went after that. It got me further into helping and coaching professions, I guess, in the sense of I then went on to Adelaide for a year, working in a school, private school, helping the PE department. All of these gate keys together ended up allowing me to go to San Francisco to coach soccer, which was an amazing opportunity. All of those things again came together, so you can see it's a bit of a journey to get to this point, bit by bit, step by step, that has allowed really for me to follow my own interests. It's kind of how it's developed. I've seen it as this like linear period where my American coaching dream didn't go as well as I hoped, but I always had the interest to follow my own curiosities in regards to knowledge and my own education side. And that's where personal training came for me next. And from there, after I realized that I loved investing in myself and loved investing in education to help with other people, I realized that the next level progression for myself required that investment. So then that allowed me to get involved in a field that had that kind of investment for me, which ultimately was IT. And it was here in which I earned my promotions and pay rises, and has helped shape the program I lead today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you spent the early part of your career maximizing what you thought were your resources to follow your dreams, but you also realized that you've also been incredibly fortunate to, as you said, coach and gain the experiences over the last 12 years. So tell me about the value of perspective and how you define that as well.
The value perspective, I've been very kind of lucky in these situations. I feel, in the sense of perspective, I believe you make your own luck in being in the right place to capitalize on those moments. The value I kind of had for me was I always knew I had an overriding goal. Let's say going abroad in my career, but I never minded how I got there. I think that's the biggest value, in the sense that it never entered my mind that I had to do it this way or this fixed career path. I guess that my flexibility or humbleness, whatever you want to call it, allowed me to be in those positions to take my shot at those opportunities. That being in the right place at the right time allowed you to capitalize on those opportunities. And just want to check if I answered the question there for you. Do you want me to clarify anything?
No, that's totally fine. And, Jordan, I also wanted to get your perspective on the concept of inclusivity, buddy, because, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I work with business leaders to infuse individuals with disabilities into the workforce. So tell me, when you think about the concept of inclusivity, what do you think of when it comes to folks with disabilities and all people as well?
Of course, and really, it's just an opportunity for me to say I'm so kind of very thankful that I've had an opportunity to speak to you regarding this. So I think it's amazing the platform that you've built and the voice that it gives other people. So I just want to take the time to appreciate the work that you're doing there.
Thank you.
The inclusivity for me kind of comes from that position of psychological safety. And what that means for me is, once you feel as if you know how you can contribute with your voice, I'm sure you'll say yourself, you start to feel brave enough to start collaborating your authentic ideas to people. And that's where you get, in terms of inclusivity, it forms emotional ties, right? In terms of, they always form the foundation of any kind of performance that you have in your career, whereas you build those rapports with different people from different perspectives. And essentially, some of the best coaching teams I have been a part of have included voices from each level of perspective, right? You often want every level to breed that kind of culture. And I've always kept that in mind whenever I do my coaching, just how I can include the inclusivity in that. And the world's kind of changed, I think, in the sense that when people were thinking of, and especially millennials, were in careers, it was very much that autocratic style, right? In the sense that you had your authoritative leaders who would, to say it very generically, would just yell commands and you'd accept. Do you understand what I mean there?
Absolutely, yeah.
You still have those leaders, don't get me wrong, and people will execute those actions, but always with the caveat of, what's the bigger picture? How does this connect together? And I think that's, in terms of going back to your question about inclusivity, I think that's the main question that leads people right now, is what is the big goal? What is this movement going to take me forward, and how is it going to connect to what I want to do and how I want to shape my own vision of how to promote inclusivity, and especially millennials feel that the most. And that's why I enjoy working with them.
Yeah, and you also say that millennial career development and the concept of that requires more than just motivational tactics. So I wonder if you could expand on that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it very fascinating with how career change and talent and skill development works. And it takes, I guess, inspiration from my own journey that I always find, and I'm sure you'll say the same, that motivational concepts are helpful, whether that you surround yourself with good music or whatever gets you in the right headspace. But I always find, at least for myself and the people that I work with, the biggest breakthroughs came through having a clarity of target of where you want to go, as well as a clear set of principles that guide you. Um, it's again going back to the idea of shifting mindsets and points in society, in the sense that where in the 2000s, from my viewpoint, career professionals always had that clear target in mind, but it was always to work at a specific place or a specific level. I feel like now we're at a place where millennials are more thinking what, going back to what I was saying before, what matters to me in my career and how does this business fit me and my values. It's become much more of an internal psychological process to navigate. And that's where I guess the depth comes in. And that's where I find the most fun in terms of how I enjoy coaching millennials, because with that psychological mix, each person is different. And it's fun to be able to coach them through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jordan, building on the psychological makeup of millennials, I'm curious to ask you about how millennials can build confidence and overcome their nervousness.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The biggest thing for anyone watching this and listening to this, what daily actions are you taking to generate your own confidence? The biggest kind of thing for me to build confidence is having a daily consistent action of positive self-talk. And that can be generated by committing actions to make you feel good in the long run, right? Such as exercising to what you enjoy the most. There's a lot of, especially I guess, discourse that in the personal training world, that each person has their own sport. And I think that idea is very much apparent here, in the sense that each person can find a process that they can start and get better at and start to build confidence at. And it goes back to that idea of inclusiveness again, in the sense that each person can find a area in which they can achieve small wins and build that confidence up to the point where they get competent. And that's the place that you can build towards, is just gaining the small wins in each area, tracking them, and really reflecting on how far you've come in a short space of time as well. It's regular feedback loops. I'm sure you would agree that would help start confidence first of all, but also to maintain that confidence in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always tell people that it's important to celebrate the wins, no matter how big or how small, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, what's the point otherwise, right?
Absolutely. Now, Jordan, I wanted to ask you about your personal connection to your clients, in the sense that I know for you, your own career journey, you were expecting to experience a career defeat, but you also did it from a personal perspective. So, tell me about the value of connection and what you've learned about your own career journey that influences the work that you do today.
Yeah. I've always kind of, in the early years of my career, I didn't have the levels and depths of self-awareness I do now. But looking from today, I've always had quite a strong level of emotion in any concept. I guess it's what you call an empath in the sense that you can feel high levels of emotion to any given context. What held me back for lots of my early career was almost a sense of whenever I failed at something, there was a strong level of emotion that suddenly came up, and I didn't necessarily know at the time how to deal with it. I guess it's so you default to easy gratification, right? In the sense that you want to make yourself feel good, you want to try and protect yourself against any periods of failure that can negate that. And really, what kind of held me back for so long in that regard is not opening myself up to the positivity around, and that goes back to confidence before and how you can maintain it each day. Am I on track with the question? I just want to check.
Yeah, and Jordan, just a follow up to that. How do you think millennials can demonstrate aggressiveness without sort of being cocky in the pursuit of what they want to capture from a career perspective?
So it's important to have that balance, right? In a sense that when you implement the style of wanting to improve yourself, you often become obsessed is a strong word, but it is a kind of obsession in trying to get every 1% you can to try and improve. And in terms of how you look after yourself in that process, I think it's really important that whilst you do have periods where you are consciously pushing towards your goal, you also need to have the balance of rest periods, reflection periods, and action steps, really, to help guide you forward in a way that you know you're looking after every element of your physical being and your mental well-being. And really, it does start. The main advice I would give to people is at the start of the week, or on the end of a Sunday or a Saturday, for instance, is to just give yourself a list of 5 questions, just plotting down, for example, how did you spend your energy this week? How did your energy match the output that you gave to that week? What is it that you wanted to achieve for this week? How did you progress in those goals? And what could you do to be better in your goal for the following week? I think as long as there's that clear definition of progress to small steps, then I think millennials can't go too far wrong.
Yeah, and Jordan, I wanted to talk to you about pursuing things outside of your comfort zone, because I know that you have personal experience about that, and sort of how do you strike a balance of not berating yourself when you don't accomplish something, but really trying to push the limits of the possible to really maximize your potential as a millennial?
I think it's very key to be very authentic with yourself, and to know exactly what your strengths are and how you can leverage them to maximize your best output. And especially for myself, when I was going through my own transformation as such, going back to the idea of that easy gratification, I was tremendously lucky to have that success when I was younger. And it was that upward ascendancy that gave me the shaky foundation. What when I did fail, it was from a place of wanting to be better. So kind of once I realized that, and once people can realize that, that can release a lot of internal pressure that you can put on yourself. And that's the biggest challenge that any career focused development person has, is how can you recharge yourself whilst also maintaining the standards that you want to set towards hitting your goals? Is it potentially you're looking at a short span? Maybe your goals are not realistic enough to hit in that time frame. Maybe you give yourself a bit more time, a bit more security. It's all those kind of things going back to the psychological safety. Can you get yourself in a position where you are psychologically secure in your clarity of vision, psychologically safe in your execution of that vision, and psychologically safe in how and what processes you can use to relieve that internal pressure on yourself?
Yeah, and Jordan, tell me, I'm fascinated to ask you about how you create a blueprint to sort of live an effective, fulfilling, and rewarding life, both personally and professionally.
Yes, the thing I find really fulfilling and the best about this process that I have with my clients is that it's very much from the ground up. It's very much dependent on what that person has as their experiences coming into the session. So the main thing we start with is meeting the person where they are is such an important concept. What are limiting beliefs that they may have? What are the narratives that they tell themselves? What are their goals? What are their visions? How do they value their friendships? How do they value their family, their spouse? Really, in terms of building the foundations of that blueprint, it does come from a grounding of self-evaluation. And really, that once we have that foundation, we start to look at what toolkits we can build together that work for that person. Because what I've learned, and you might agree with this, say take something like journaling, for instance. Like I know for myself, it works quite well as a way to drive myself forward. However, I've definitely had it with clients where journaling often creates more anxiety rather than it solves anxiety. So it's a case of how that person reacts to the narratives in their minds that causes stress. We unpack that and work towards giving them the right tools that work for them to navigate towards their career. And that's mainly the first bit what we work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan, I'm also wondering your thoughts on how mental health and career prosperity are interconnected.
It's a really good question. I was listening to I forget who the guest was on your show before talking about mental health. The Australian bloke. But I thought that was a really fascinating insight into mental health. And you often do see that with pushing yourself to be the best, potentially, in your field, if that's what you want, or even to just progress your career, no matter what field that you're in, if you're looking to grow, there is an element of stress involved. No matter what you do, there's nothing you can do to turn that stress off or ignore it, it's coming, right? So how mental health and progression work together is how can you reframe that stress and turn it into positive stress? A type of eustress, for instance. How is it that you will be able to get back up after you take a bad day at work? How will you reframe any coaching session you may have had that may not have gone well? How will you build that clarity of refining your skill set so that when you go to that situation again, you will be better for it, one step at a time?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan, I'll tell you that I'm coming to you from Canada, Bonnie, and I know that you live there in England, and I know that Canada and England have quite the relationship, buddy. So tell me about your favorite part about living in England and what you like so very much about living internationally as well.
It's really interesting because I was thinking about this the other day about why I do love England so much, and I do. It's compared to say traveling. So I lived in Adelaide for a year. One thing when I was there that I really missed about England is the kind of communication that happens. There's a level of sarcasm that you just don't find anywhere else in the UK, in Australia, I should say, or in the world. And what I kind of love about that is the kind of rapport that you do build in England is very much, you do take a little bit of fun at the person that you're bonding with. But really, it's code for you're building a deeper connection. You're building trust with that person. What I found traveling abroad compared to living in England is that it gives you a wider, broad of perspective. Like when I first lived in England, my only perspective was soccer, 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 because that was the foundation and environment I grew up in. And England is very, very passionate in its soccer, in terms of the English Premier League and the EFL. Each city has a soccer club and a massive following. So deeply embedded in that culture is all the tribalism that comes with it. And that kind of, when it's in the positive side of it, you do get a sense of connection, a sense of fulfillment in following the same cause as other people. I feel that's very strong as an Englishman. But what I also loved about being abroad was having those different experiences with nature that you don't get in England. Different experiences of seeing wonderful and beautiful scenic views in New Zealand and Australia and America, for instance, and really getting to see the different levels of communication you can have with people. Some of the best conversations I have had with people were just really off the cuff, no plan, no scripts, just starting with a topic and then just running with it for hours on end. And I feel that once you kind of get that, you get that a lot through traveling. And I would recommend traveling to any kind of person for personal growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing like spontaneity sometimes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the best things.
Yeah, and Jordan, as we wrap up here, buddy, I'm curious to ask you about personal and professional prosperity and how you would define it for your clients and for yourself personally.
Okay. In terms of, I think for both, I would probably say that the levels of prosperity comes with a place of authenticity and living in the moment. Having that degree of control over the decisions that you can make and the options that you can make in your life, that to me is the idea of prosperity, in the sense that you are able to control your own growth. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And in terms of prosperity, I think that also comes from how you're looking after yourself. And I'm reflecting on myself and both the clients that I have. How are you looking after yourself in regards to the physical and mental side of it? Because in my mind, going back to the dials I mentioned right at the beginning, in my mind, there is those dials that you can dial up in terms of having like a really secure group as one dial, or support group, I should say. Then the second would be your career. How prosperous are you in that? How are your relationships with family, for instance? How is your relationship with yourself as another dial? Really, in terms of I view prosperity as very much a holistic process for both myself and the clients that I work with and the clients I've had success with. And the ones that I've had success with the most are when they come from that place of authenticity and living in the present moment, as well as having control over what experiences you want to have and a strategy in how you want to achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan, a final question for you is, when you look at your life and you consider your personal and professional legacy, I'm curious to know how you would want that to be defined.
So for me, I'm going to lean on the experiences that I picked up in sport. I've always kind of been inspired by the idea of leaving the shirt in a better place than you found it. That kind of metaphor. I say shirt because that would be specific to me and my actions rather than any organization that I've kind of worked with in the past. And the legacy I kind of have is it's best where it's authentic, where you can co-create outcomes together and leave a wider mark than what we are just working towards in that moment. For example, the person I'm coaching often has a wider community that they're either a part of or they look after, whether that would be their family or spouse or commitments to their actual community. There's a quote that drives me forwards almost every day in my coaching, that in the book Legacy by James Kerr. Have you heard of it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. It asks you in a clever way to think of your job on the planet as a way to drive your own fulfillment. And I utilize that as part of my own blueprint of how I want to coach going forward and how I want to guide my career going forward. And for me, the job on the planet and how I can generate value is through my coaching. And my coaching skills are how I can generate value in my own career and other people. So I have this almost aim to create that positive ripple effect for myself and others through my coaching. And in the end, what result I look to have through my coaching is I wish to work towards building people of great character for myself and for the people that I coach, who can then have that positive ripple effect in their inner circle, which would then hopefully create a ripple for those people, and so on and so forth. If I can achieve that, I'd be happy and fulfilled with that legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan, finally, tell me if people want to get connected with everybody, what's the best way they can do that?
So the best way to get in contact and book a call with me would be through the website. It's jordanwillshear.com, or to interact with me on LinkedIn. It's Jordan Willshear with the same name, and that's the best way to get in contact with me at the moment.
Well, fabulous, Jordan. I really enjoyed our conversation about personal development for millennials and helping them achieve a career success. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, my friend, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me today. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, it's honestly been a blast. I've really enjoyed the process, and I'm glad that we've had this occasion to get to know each other and hopefully help people through this conversation.